But, when people had mental disorders, it wasn't, at least it wasn't commonplace to try to teach them about and normalize the mental disorders in classrooms, because children are experimenting with ideas and children always want to be different.
Yeah.
And if you say to kids, like, obviously propaganda works. If you tell kids smoke cigarettes, they all start smoking cigarettes. We've learned this. And then in my generation, we stomped out smoking cigarettes because of the reverse course on that and saying, like, no, actually cancer kills. They taught us in the classroom that cancer kills. And now the majority of people who were smoking like crazy in the 80s are not smoking anymore. So we know that psychological conditioning works, and that the majority of these 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds are not non-binary. They're just learning that as a way to be different, they can experiment with these things. And unfortunately, these have very evil results, because kids are being put on drugs that are quite literally used on pedophiles.
Well,
in prison.
That's not necessarily so. But listen, let me just say that about
is a drug.
I think that
drug
there are a
that
lot
is
of
used
things.
on pedophiles in
There's a
prison.
lot.
That's what's being given to children.
What's up, YouTube? Hope you guys are feeling good. My name is Elario, and today I'm back with another super amazing video to check out with you guys. This is called Don Lemon, Candace Owens clash on gay marriage versus election denial. This is going to be a tough one, guys. So let's just sit back, relax, and check this out.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know about, I'm not sure I would call it an indoctrination. I do believe that it's legitimate to say that you have questions about it, because it's a lot to take in. I wouldn't necessarily call it an indoctrination. And when I grew up, there were definitely trans people. And maybe there wasn't an awareness of it in the world or the country at large. But I remember trans people growing up. I remember people who were cross-dressers growing up. My girlfriend's brother was a transvestite growing up. So there were definitely people who were out there who were part of the trans community. And I remember the threats that Chris got from my girlfriend's brother. I remember people on the street throwing things at him and threatening him. So I'm not sure it's an indoctrination. I think it's just maybe an awareness of things that happen in society. And that doesn't mean that the pendulum doesn't swing too far sometimes, but I'm not sure I would call it an indoctrination. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, when I was in school, I learned that it was a mental disorder. I know that's changed, but it was in the DSM-5 as a mental disorder. And I accept that there are mental disorders, and people that are suffering from mental disorders should never be treated by people harassing them or people yelling at them or calling them names. So I'm sorry that someone that you knew went through that. But, when people had mental disorders, it wasn't, at least it wasn't commonplace to try to teach them about and normalize the mental disorders in classrooms, because children are experimenting with ideas and children always want to be different. And if you say to kids, like, obviously propaganda works. If you tell kids smoke cigarettes, they all start smoking cigarettes. We've learned this. And then in my generation, we stomped out smoking cigarettes because of the reverse course on that and saying, like, no, actually cancer kills. They taught us in the classroom that cancer kills. And now the majority of people who were smoking like crazy in the 80s are not smoking anymore. So we know that psychological conditioning works, and that the majority of these 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds are not non-binary. They're just learning that as a way to be different, they can experiment with these things. And unfortunately, these have very evil results, because kids are being put on drugs that are quite literally used on pedophiles.
Well,
in prison.
That's not necessarily so. But listen, let me just say that about
is a drug.
I think that there are a lot of
used
things
on pedophiles in prison. That's what's being given to children.
There's a lot to respond to that as far as the indoctrination. If it was an indoctrination, then I went to a Catholic school, so then I would be, a straight male married to a woman who attends church every single day. If there was any sort of indoctrination that was happening, so apparently the indoctrination at the Catholic school did not work on me, because I ended up being the exact opposite of what they wanted. The other thing is that the whole idea that they're giving young children drugs at an age, and the children are getting to decide at an age that they need these medical drugs for transitioning, that is absolutely not true.
What do you mean that's not true? You can get,
and also,
you can get puberty blockers as a child. I had a whole person on my show who
that's
spoke
also
to
with
that
the consent
transition
of the family. And the family, you can get puberty blockers as a child, but The
Yes.
parents have to decide that. That's not
Yes, so
some
they can get
child
puberty blockers.
who's decided. The parent and the child gets to decide that. So
Okay, but that they should puberty
that's a
blockers
whole nother thing. And then
fundamentally
you're
alter
saying it's
them
a
for
mental
life.
disorder. You understand that it has not been, it's been deemed not to be a mental disorder. And then you're saying that that you're, in your rhetoric, you're saying that it's a mental disorder.
It is a mental
It's not
disorder.
a
That's what I
mental
learned in
disorder.
school.
It's not
It
a
is a
mental
mental
disorder.
disorder.
Okay,
If you
so
think that you're a boy and you're actually a girl, you are suffering from a mental disorder, obviously, because you can't actually change your sex, obviously.
I
You
know
can
plenty
get
of children now. I know
you
plenty
can
of
play
young
dress up, but you can't change your sex.
young people and old people who
Mhm.
are trans, right? And they are not pretending, and it is not a mental disorder.
Well, it is
They
pretending because
know,
you will literally never be
and
able,
they
if you are a
know,
little boy, to grow up and have a
and
baby
their
because
parents know.
you're
And
not a little
I would
girl.
hope that your child
So
would not grow up, or your children would not grow up, and then thinking that they're trans, and then their parents telling them the exact opposite.
I would
That would
tell
not be.
them that they have a mental disorder,
Yeah.
and we're gonna get them help.
I
So
want to play this
that's really
because
important.
to continue this conversation, when I say that, I think that your views have changed over time. This is a clip from one of your shows. It was just last week as we continue this conversation. It's about flat earth and round earth and conspiracies. Let's play this.
Sure. If there's a bunch of people that believe something, I now want to know what it is that they believe. And of course, he pushed me on this, and he was talking about the earth curvature and science. And I said to him, listen, I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a round earther. Actually, what I am is I am somebody who has left the cult of science. I have left the mega church of science, because what I have now realized is that science, what it is actually, if you think about it, is a pagan faith.
Okay. Candace,
Yeah.
do you actually believe this stuff, or are you saying it because you want to generate outrage and you
whenever they
want
ask
more
that kind of
attention
question.
and you want people to sort of click on your show? Do you actually believe that? I mean, science is science. What do you mean the cult of science? What do you believe? You're not a flat earther or a round earther?
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
sometimes I think you're a very bright and very intelligent woman. And I said, is she just playing in our faces? Like, what's that all about?
First, let me ask you, did you watch the full episode, or did your producers pull a clip out of
No,
context?
I did not watch the full episode, but I'm
Okay, so let me
asking you
put it
to
into
put it
context.
into
Yeah, no, sure.
context.
I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to put it
Thank
into
you. Thank
context,
you.
because that's the beauty of the media. It's just always a
Yeah.
clip, and then people go, oh, what's going on here? So that was an episode we were talking about birth control. I was sharing, I'm very passionately against the birth control because of all the women who in my life are suffering side effects, who can't get pregnant, and are realizing that inserting copper IUDs into your body over time can have an impact. And women were sharing their stories online about how the doctor told them it was safe and effective, and it obviously wasn't safe and effective long term, because people just simply accept what the experts tell them without thinking. We saw this during COVID, so I'm very comfortable saying this. But if I had been saying this years ago, people would have been like, she's crazy. But this is what we mean when we say science. And by the way, these ideas, if you want someone even more brilliant than me who wrote about this, C.S. Lewis would be a great starting place. He termed this scientism, where the people that are in control of science create a faith. They create a faith by saying, well, the experts say 6 feet social distancing works. And so everyone starts walking around with 6 feet social distance between them until Fauci comes around, like he did recently, and say, we kind of made that up. We were just guessing. The experts say the COVID vaccine, if you get it, you will not transmit or be able to get
Not
COVID.
exactly
And
what
then they
they
go,
said, but go on.
actually, that wasn't true. So people, and without knowing that, subjected their bodies and said, okay, I'm going to get this vaccine. Then they say the science has changed. Well, if the science changes and you've already impacted your body, as many women, I did not get the COVID vaccine, and I'm not meaning to judge people who did, but a lot of my female friends were having menstruation issues, as we talked about on the show. A lot of my female friends had miscarriages, as we talked about on the show, simply because they trusted the experts, not because they actually knew
You don't know
that
that
the
for sure that they
science
had
was
you don't know for
accurate.
sure that they had a miscarriage because of the vaccine. That's
They
what
had
they're
first
assuming.
and foremost, they've already admitted that the vaccine, like we're now past COVID era scientism. So they've admitted that the 6 feet social distancing was fraudulent science. They admitted that the masking was
You realize you're
fraudulent
looking at
science.
something in hindsight. Hindsight is 2020 in your Monday
Well,
morning
that's the point.
quarterbacking, right?
And until you
So
get hindsight, it's just a faith. And that is what I am talking about on my show. It is just a faith. People placed faith. It was not a science, it was a faith. Okay.
you said a
Real
phase or a
science.
faith?
So that's a faith. You just believe it. You can't see it. You
Okay.
trust the person. You trust this person who is a science, who's a doctor, who you've enacted as the Lord in your life, and you shouldn't do that. Common sense
Who
to
should
me
you
when I was a
trust?
kid, common sense to me when I was a kid, like when people were pushing birth control pills on me when I turned like 15, every time I went to the doctor, women who are watching this will relate. They're suddenly like, birth control, you got a pimple, birth control. I didn't need to trust the science or the experts I just said to myself, yeah, probably not a good idea to microdose yourself with hormones every single
What does
day.
that have
No,
to
it
do with a
didn't.
worldwide pandemic and epidemic where people were
I'm answering the clip that you just showed. I'm
where a
putting this
lot
into
of people, I
context.
know, but you're going,
Yeah.
I want to go
But
quickly.
because that's also what I talked about on my show. This is the beauty of actually watching a full episode and not using a clip. And so I said, now for me, it's going to require a little bit more than a faith, right? Because I'm realizing scientism just gets people to do things based on emotion without actually, and just going, trust the experts, trust the experts. I'm not trusting the experts on anything anymore. Okay. I'm going to actually take a look at things and actually try to discern something by myself. Because the experts have
But
lied
isn't that based
routinely
on
and people's
emotion
lives are
as
ruined.
well?
People got myocarditis. Kids died from heart attacks, and they admitted after the fact that they knew that could be a risk. And first, they
No,
gaslit the
I
moms
just
who were saying
researched
it
that,
happened.
and that is not true. But
That is, what do
go
you mean
on.
it's not true? There was a kid who won a lawsuit for myocarditis. He
Yeah.
quite literally, if you can look this up on Yahoo News, myocarditis, he actually won. The government had to pay him, I believe it was in the Philippines, who had to actually pay him. And after that point, after that lawsuit, they started putting the warning on the vaccines that it can cause myocarditis. So it doesn't help. It doesn't help if you're saying that you're no longer a part of the establishment. You're doing your podcast. At least acknowledge the things that even they have acknowledged now, that it causes
Well,
myocarditis, that it can impact menstruation. Anything that is impacting
I
your
never
menstruation
said I
is
wasn't part of
impacting
the
your reproductive
establishment, by the
health.
way. I said I did not work for CNN, but go on.
Okay, so okay. I'm glad you're admitting you're part of the establishment.
No, I mean, I don't believe that I'm part of an establishment, any sort of establishment. You would have to, you would have to,
That was
the premise is
wonderful.
that I belong to some part of an establishment.
Okay. Okay. That was a lot. As I said, we all saw the energy in it. Okay, first off, on the issue of cross dressing and all that. Okay. I do agree with Don Lemon when he said that these things have actually been there. Like, we see people who actually, like, for example, girls who dress like guys and guys who happen to dress like girls. Although not as frequent as we see the girls dressing like guys, because the whole effeminate male thing, even though it was there, it was not as pronounced as the masculine female kind of thing. So I do agree with Don Lemon when he said that this has actually like been a part of the community. But it's where I disagree with him is that it's not normal. In that case, I agree with Candace Owens when she said it's a mental disorder. And he did give the example that his girlfriend's brother was often stoned, hit, cursed, abused, and all manner of ill treatment. And Candice did say that when someone has a mental disorder, they're not meant to be harassed. Quite true. And the thing is, if these people in society today are not continuously harassed, then with adequate help, they might be able to change. Because this entire context of gender dysphoria is real. And the fact that he's debunking it and making it seem like it's a normal thing is just wrong. Because you can't actually feed that to a child. That's why he doesn't believe it's indoctrination. But in every sense, it's indoctrination, because even for someone who doesn't feel that way, for the fact that you tell them it's normal, they'll start experimenting with it. That's just how kids are. So by the time you tell them this is normal, by the time you tell them that, okay, yeah, this is the way to go, this is how society is, right or wrong, they'll start messing with it. That's the truth. So I do agree with Candice. People with this sort of mental condition should be gotten adequate help, rehabilitated. They shouldn't be encouraged for any reason, but they shouldn't be harassed either. And even as I said, it has been in community since time immemorial, but there were kind of, I don't know if I'm to use the word secluded, if it fits there, but they were quiet, they kept to themselves, they stayed on their lane. They were actually relating like normal people until now, where we all have a lot of communities set up to actually aggressively push forth this wrong notion. It's just so wrong. Now on the COVID vaccines, we all heard a lot of things in the media about those vaccines, and safe to say, a lot of people didn't take it. A lot of people who took it are actually regretting it, as Candace said. And the thing is, that clip that she said that they brought out on the round earth, flat earth, and science is a pagan faith. I do agree with Candace there, because science, or anything that has to do with science, is something that when the experts actually put them, when the experts actually say that this thing goes, you see the entire populace blindly believing it without, checking in or making any research or asking any questions. They just blindly believe it. And for something that you don't see, for something that you really have no proof of, but you just believe it exists, that's faith. And she did point out a lot of let's say wrong points in the vaccine, or what the vaccine cost. As she said, menstruation issues, miscarriages, a lot of women were actually adversely affected by this vaccine. Now, the only thing is, for this guy, Mr. Don Lemon, he did say on indoctrination that he went to a Catholic school, he didn't believe all their values. He was meant to be a straight white male if he was a straight male if he was to follow their values, but he came out the direct opposite. Now, I actually see here that he's denying the fact of everything. Even went to the extent of telling Candace that he prays her children don't become trans, and she tells them it's a mental disorder. I mean, that was just an off thing to say. But for the fact that he's denying this whole thing, I'm really wondering. I'm gonna rephrase the question he asked Candace. When he says all these things, does he actually believe it, or he just wants to get more followers? Because this is something that is so clear to see, but yet he's actively denying it. And on the values he refused to adopt, everything is a matter of choice. The same way they're feeding garbage to these kids right now is the same way he refused to be taught the correct thing. Some kids now may not follow what the woke community is saying, but that does not mean that indoctrination doesn't still happen. It happens at every single point in time. It's just left for you to be smart enough to know right from wrong, do your research, and know what's actually profitable, meaningful, and sensible in the long run. His denial was just too much. Anyway, guys, I'm sure we learned one or two things from this video. Please let us know what you think in the comment section. And please remember to leave a thumbs up at the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and stay safe.